Every country has their serial killers or criminals that garner some level of infamy because of their crimes and because of the stories that come out when they are captured. In Canada, many people will obviously name Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, as well as Robert Pickton, but another name that is often mentioned, especially by people who were alive at the time, is Roch Theriault. The story of Roch Theriault involves murder, physical, mental, and emotional assault, a cult, and so much more. Hello, my name is Lance, and welcome to episode 159 of Gone But Never Forgotten, Roch Theriault and the Ant Hill Kids. Roch Theriault was born on May 16th of 1947 into a French-Canadian family, and he was raised in Thetford Mines in south-central Quebec, which is located in the Appalachian Mountains. Roch was considered to be an incredibly intelligent young man when he was a child, but he ultimately dropped out of school when he was only in the 7th grade. Roch then began to study and teach himself the Old Testament of the Bible, and he started to genuinely believe that the end of the world was very near and that it would be brought on by a war between good and evil. When Roch was only 21 years old, he got married for the first time to a woman named Francine, and the two would stay together for 7 years and have 2 children together. Roch supported his family in part by selling wood carvings that he created. Roch was very industrious and he knew how to use his gifts, something that would certainly be a part of his success and his downfall later in life. A few years into the marriage, Roch's health took a significant turn for the worse when he started to suffer from abdominal pain. He was eventually diagnosed with stomach ulcers, and he would even undergo numerous surgeries to stop the stomach pains and fix the ulcers, but those surgeries wound up making things worse for Roch rather than better. After that experience, Roch started to develop a deep disdain for anyone who worked in the medical field, especially for doctors, and he started to do his own research, studying medical journals and similar things. The only thing that Roch felt aided him with his pain and his sufferings were substances and alcohol, so he started to become increasingly dependent upon those things, and those things started to drastically change his personality. As he struggled with dependency issues, the finances of his family crumbled, and Roch became angry and violent, and he even had an extramarital affair. After 7 years of marriage, Francine filed for divorce from Roch. After the divorce was finalized, Roch actually would get married a second time to the woman that he had cheated on Francine with, a woman named Giselle LaFrance. During this time, Roch started to clean up his life. He stopped his drug and alcohol dependencies, and he stopped being a monster, and instead, he really dove into those medical journals further and started to preach to anyone that would listen about medical discoveries that he believed he was making. During that time, Roch would also convert from Catholicism, which he was raised in, to the Seventh-day Adventist Church in January of 1977, and he began to heavily inundate himself with the practices and the rituals and beliefs of that denomination. The Seventh-day Adventist Church centers themselves largely on holistic beliefs, and they also encourage their members to push hard for a healthy lifestyle with no unhealthy foods and no tobacco. Roch started to get a lot of attention within the Seventh-day Adventist Church because once he started rolling within it, he turned heads because he evangelized and he went door to door and he started to get more and more people to come to the church and become part of the church. He found a great use for his charisma, his ability to convince people that the church was the place for them to be, and just his general personality. He started to develop such a following that his church even started to allow him to give sermons on Sundays because people were so interested in hearing him speak and in hearing what he had to say. Over time, though, Roch's messages started to change, and he started to speak on the apocalypse and speak about the ways that he believed he could heal and speak about the messages that he said he was receiving from God. And a lot of those messages actually were counterculture and went against the church and their beliefs, and so they slowly started to distance themselves from Roch. In 1977, he convinced a group of people to leave the church and leave their jobs and leave their families, their entire lives behind, to join him and to start their own religious movement of sorts. The group would form together in Ste. Marie, Quebec, and the express goal of the group was to form a commune where the people could freely listen to his motivational speeches, and they could all live in unity and equality and be free of sin. The original reason for the group was to prepare for the end of the world. As a part of the agreement to become a part of Roch's commune, it was known that members would be forbidden from contact with their families outside of the commune, and they would also be forbidden to have any contact or ties with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because their beliefs went against Roch's beliefs and his values of freedom. He believed to truly be free, his followers needed to cut all ties to their old lives. As Roch preached and studied and believed that he was hearing from God, he became locked in on the fact that the end of the world was coming, and he locked in on the fact that that date would be February of 1979. He wanted to use the commune as a place that he and others could prepare for that date. He claimed that God had clearly told him that February 1979 was indeed the time that he would be returning and the world as they knew it would end. As an aside, if you know anything about the Christian faith, if you know anything about the Bible, you probably are aware of the fact that it's very clear that Christians do not, will not, and just plain out don't know when God will return. We don't know when Revelation is coming. We don't know when the end of the world is coming. So there is already obviously a key fallacy in what Roch was telling his people, and it's about to be discovered. In 1978, he made the move of moving the commune in preparation of February 1979, and the group hiked to a mountainside that Roch called Eternal Mountain, which was located in Hope, Quebec, and it's located on the Gaspé Peninsula. Roch claimed that that was the place that all of them needed to be and to live so that they could be saved when the apocalypse came. Once they were situated at Eternal Mountain, Roch had his followers build a town for them to live within while he relaxed and gave out directions. He was slowly becoming more and more of a dictator than a religious leader. As Roch watched his people work and build, he realized that he was like the queen of the colony, and his people were like his worker ants, and so he named his followers the Ant Hill Kids. Around this time, Roch started to change people's names that were a part of his commune, and he started to name each and every one of them after biblical people. He started to call himself Moïse, which means Moses in French. He said that he was Moses reincarnated, and he demanded that everyone that was there should treat him that way. I know that it might be difficult to believe, but Roch was not correct about the end of the world coming in February of 1979, and that, of course, started to become a sour spot very quickly between Roch and the Anthill kids. They realized that his teachings and his wisdom may in fact not be as sound as they had first believed. Roch, though, was quick on his feet, and he pointed out to them that the time on earth and the time in heaven were not the same. He said that the times were not parallel, and that he had misunderstood what God was telling him, and that the time pertained to the time in heaven rather than time on earth. Believe it or not, seemingly everyone fell for that explanation. Roch realized, though, that he needed to do more to ensure that his followers stayed with him. He knew that he needed to ensure that the people would not waver in their beliefs in him and that they would not ever leave. So he decided to accomplish those things while also ensuring that the size of the Anthill kids kept growing. Roch impregnated all of the women that were living in his commune, and as such, he fathered over 20 children with 9 different women. By the 1980s, there were nearly 40 people living on the commune, and Roch had also enforced a dress code amongst his followers, insisting that they all wear tunics that were identical to represent the fact that they were all equal, and they were all beneath him, and they were all devoted to the commune. Over time, Roch continued to evolve, and he started to move further and further away from being a motivational speaker, and he moved further and further away from preaching the gospel to his followers. Roch delved back into drinking, and again developed an addiction problem to both alcohol and other substances. With those addictions, he started to become more and more controlling, and he started to become more of a totalitarian leader than ever before. He exerted total control over the lives of his followers. He controlled all of the aspects of his followers' lives. Members were not allowed to speak to other people, either at the commune or outside of the commune, without his express permission, and unless he was present. He also wouldn't allow members of his commune to have sex with one another without his permission. He controlled lives, and all the while he stayed in power by using his charisma to cover up the fact that he was often being erratic and abusive most of the time. None of the members would speak up against Roch or even question his judgment. On top of that, nobody spoke out against him or accused him of any of the physical, mental, or emotional abuse that was going on. The abuse, though, was becoming more and more immense and constant. Roch started to inflict physical punishments on any of the followers that he deemed to be straying from the cause and straying from the beliefs of the Roch would spy on the other members, and then he would later confront them and tell them the things that he had seen them doing that were in contrast to the rules on the commune. He would then tell them that he knew what they were doing, even though he wasn't around them, and he would say God was giving him visions and messages to ensure that they were following the rules. If someone expressed that they had been thinking about leaving the commune, or worse, if they said that they did indeed want to leave, Roch would physically assault them with belts and hammers, and he would then suspend them from the ceiling, and slowly and meticulously he would pluck out every single one of their body hairs. He would also often defecate upon them. For much of the commune's existence, the women of the commune had raised money for the commune by cooking and baking and then taking their goods into town. The members of the commune, though, that did not bring in enough money also were physically assaulted for their transgressions against the collective. As time went on, the punishments that Roch doled out continued to become more and more extreme and violent. Roch started to force members to break their own legs using sledgehammers, and he would also force them to sit on stoves, shoot one another in the shoulders, and eat dead animals and feces. There was even at least one time that Roch had ordered one member to cut off another member's toes with wire cutters, just to prove to Roch that they had an undying loyalty to him. Sadly, even the children were abused. They were victims of sexual assault. They were victims of physical assault. They would even be held over fires by Roch to threaten and show his power over their mothers, threatening to burn their children alive if they strayed from his path. Some of the children were even nailed by their clothing to trees, and other children were ordered to throw stones and other items at them. In November of 1980, a 23-year-old man named Guy Veer would become the first new member of the Ant Hill Kids in 3 years. Guy suffered from depression and had seen Roch on television and fell in love with who he was and what he believed in. At first, he was not allowed to live in the communal cabin, and he was forced to live in a tool shed, and he was only fed 1 meal a day. He was also forced into essentially being the babysitter for all of the young children on the commune that were not Roch's children. This included a young child named Samuel Jaguar, who was 2 years old. On March 23rd of 1981, Roch threw a party, and Guy was not invited to the party because he was still seen as an outsider. Guy was instead told again to watch the children. While he was watching Samuel, he started to cry loudly, which woke Guy from his sleep. Guy, frustrated with his lot in life, took all of his anger out on Samuel, and he beat the 2-year-old child to so severely that Samuel was left in a coma. Again, proving his absolute insanity, Roch stepped up and decided that a circumcision would cure Samuel of all of his injuries. Roch performed the surgery himself on the kitchen table, and he gave Samuel alcohol as an anesthetic. The circumcision, shockingly, did not cure Samuel of his injuries or wake him from his coma. Instead, Samuel was found dead the following morning from presumed alcohol poisoning, and Roch decided that Samuel should be burned and buried to dispose of all evidence. Another night while drinking, Roch made the decision to hold a mock trial for Guy because of the death of Samuel. The jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity, but Roch determined that he was guilty and that he would be punished by castration. At first, Guy protested, but Roch, of course, won out. After that, life in the commune for Guy never did improve, and he felt that he essentially had the role of being the bullied in the commune. Other members were told to physically assault him by kicking him and even stabbing him. And in November 1981, Guy managed to escape the commune, and he immediately reported to police that a child had been killed and that the body had been burned and buried there. Police swarmed the commune, arrested Samuel's parents, and Roch told police that the death of the child was solely the fault of Guy. When police investigated the commune, they were absolutely disgusted by the conditions that the children were living in there, and many of the children were actually removed from the commune and placed into foster care. The parents of the children were told that they could have their children back in their custody. All they had to do was leave the commune. None of the parents took that opportunity. Roch, 4 members of the commune, and Guy were all arrested as a result of the investigation into Samuel's death, and Roch was denied bail because it was deemed that he was a danger and a menace to society. The trial went on for 9 long months, and all 6 defendants were eventually found guilty. Roch was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years of probation for criminal negligence. Maurice Grenier and Solange, one of Roch's wives, were each given 3 years probation, and Claudette Hulette and Jacques Grenier received 6-month sentences and 3 years of probation each. Guy was sentenced, but later that was overturned, and he was acquitted due to his mental health struggles. Police cleared everyone from the compound and even burned the main cabin to the ground. In February of 1984, Roch was released from prison, and of course he was again sober. Even though he had been arrested and served a sentence for criminal negligence, he still had his followers. There were less, but many of the followers immediately came back to him once he was back out on the streets. By 1984, the Ant Hill Kids consisted of 10 children, 2 men, and 9 women, as well as Roch. The group decided that they needed to rebuild their commune, and they moved from Quebec to Ontario, and they settled in an area in Somerville Township near Burnt River, Ontario, which is located in Kawartha Lakes. Roch did not stay away from alcohol for long, and soon he started to again drink heavily, and like before, his followers suffered for it. In September of 1988, Solange began to complain that she was suffering from immense stomach pain. Roch, though, said that he had all of the answers, and he was beside himself with joy that he would get to do another one of his surgeries. He told Solange that her liver was infected, and he again performed a surgery on the kitchen table. He performed the surgery without any anesthesia. He gave her an enema using molasses and olive oil through a tube into her rectum, and he punched her repeatedly in the stomach. He would then cut her abdomen open using a knife, and he ripped part of her intestines out using his bare hands. He then made another of the women stitch her up using only a needle and thread, while he had another woman shove a second tube down Solange's throat, and he had them all blow through it. All of these things were performed on Solange while she was awake, alive, and speaking. Roch then told her to stand up and take a series of hot and cold baths. By the following day, she was dead, and Roch demanded that she be buried in the nearby woods. He changed his mind later, though, and demanded that Solange be exhumed because he believed that he had the power to resurrect her. Roch had his followers saw off the cap of her skull, but ultimately he was unable to resurrect her from the dead. She was again buried near the commune. Gabrielle Lavallee had been one of Roch's earliest followers, and she had been with Roch for over a decade. On several different occasions, she made the decision to flee the commune, but ultimately she always came back, and she was always punished. She was physically, mentally, and emotionally abused by Roch many times over the years, and she had her genitals burnt by welding torches. She had a hypodermic needle broken off in her back, and she had even had 8 of her teeth forcibly removed. She had also had part of her breast cut off, and she had even had her head smashed in with the blunt end of an axe. She would finally hit her breaking point, almost too late, in July of 1989. She was seated with Roch at the table, and she told him that she had a problem with the feeling in her hand. Without warning, Roch stabbed her through the hand with a hunting knife, pinning her to the table. He then would retrieve a meat cleaver, and with her pinned to the table, he amputated her arm. Somehow, she managed to survive the amputation and ran off into the woods and escaped to the nearest town, where she managed to get to a hospital for treatment. The police were of course notified, and she thankfully told police everything. Knowing now that the gig was up, Roch fled to Quebec with 3 of his cult members, and it actually took police 6 weeks to locate Roch, and when they did, they were able to arrest him and several of his followers. Prosecutors wanted Roch to go to prison for first-degree murder, but the presiding judge in the case deemed that there was not enough evidence to prove that the murder was premeditated. The charge was then dropped to second-degree murder in that case against Solange, and Roch pled guilty. Ultimately, he was sentenced to life in prison. He also received a concurrent sentence of 12 years for the forced amputation of Gabrielle's arm. Authorities had long held suspicions about Roch and about what was going on at the commune. However, the cult was officially registered as a church, and that meant that officials were legally unable to investigate the adults and could only do what they could to try and help the children and ensure their welfare. It was Gabrielle who, after a decade of suffering, had finally given authorities the information that they needed to investigate. After Roch was imprisoned, most of his followers finally abandoned him, realizing that he was a horrifying man, or that he was never going to get out of prison, or both. However, Roch did father 4 more children while he was in prison when female followers came to him for conjugal visits. In 2000, Roch was moved to Dorchester Penitentiary, which is located in New Brunswick. In 2002, he applied the only time for parole, but was denied, and he did not ever apply for parole again. He was considered to be too high of a risk to reoffend. On February 26th of 2011, at the age of 63, Roch was found dead near his cell at Dorchester, and his death was the result of an altercation with his cellmate, a man named Matthew Gerard MacDonald. Matthew, too, was in prison for murdering a Prince George, British Columbia taxi driver in 1984. Matthew pled guilty to second-degree murder in the death of Roch, and he was sentenced to life in prison, which he was already serving for the previous murder charge. Matthew had stabbed Roch in the neck with a shiv, and afterwards he had walked calmly down to the guard station, handed them the shiv, and told them, quote, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up," unquote. And so, perhaps fittingly, Roch Theriault's life came to an end unceremoniously at the hands of a man and a knife. After a life of leading a cult and making many people's lives a living hell, Roch was the father of 22 children. And so ends another case. This one regarded as quite possibly the worst and most violent cult in Canadian history. There's little doubt that Roch was a madman, but as we see often in cases like this one, charisma can take a madman a long way in this world. I always struggle to understand why people make the choice to give up everything for a world and a life like the one that Roch provided, but sadly there are people among us who see that kind of life as an upgrade or an escape. I fear that the way that things are going in many places around the world, that there is opportunity for more monsters like Roch Theriault to rise up and manipulate victims. I hope that you know that you deserve a better life than any life that's filled with abuse of any kind. With that, I will thank you for listening to another episode of Gone But Never Forgotten, and I will thank you for supporting the show. If you would like to help the show even more, please look for GBNF on Patreon at patreon.com/GBNF podcast and sign up for a small fee and get even more cases and even more perks in the future. Bailey and I are working on something we're going to try in the near future as well that I think many will find exciting. So stay tuned for that. Our patrons, of course, will know before everyone else. I hope that you and yours are well and continue to be well, and I hope that all of you listening are part of the good in this world and always continue to strive to be better. I'll see you back here again next week.